Okay, good. So I am here with Cerys Jones, who is the co-founder of Repair Cafe Wales, and probably, in fact, actually, is more involved with anyone with Repair Cafe Wales and has been over the last few years. So, hello, Cerys.
Hello.
So could you tell us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got involved with Repair Cafe Wales, or how you started it up?
Yes. So I guess my background has been in the commercial sector for just over 20 years as an executive assistant for various organisations across the world. And I came back to Cardiff in 2015 as an exec assistant for a financial services organisation. And I was looking for something nice to do outside of work that would sort of help my community, just do something good, basically. And I saw a social media post on a community group from a chap saying that he would like to set up a repair cafe, which sparked my curiosity. Had a quick look online about what a repair cafe is and realised that that is right up my street because part of the things that a repair cafe do is obviously repair things, and I was brought up with my mum repairing everything and being dressed in fourth generational hand-me-down clothes, and everything was reused. We went to the co-op when we were little to get local food. It's just a lot of community orientated growing up type stuff. So having read into it and seeing obviously we fix things at repair cafes, but also seeing the other benefits of the community and social side of things, I thought that sounds fab. And I know that I'm very organised, so I thought I could maybe add some value. So organised a coffee and a chat to get it going, and then obviously met you, who is the other person, who was the social media person. Between us, obviously set up the first Catay's Repair Cafe in April 2017, and the rest is history because it was incredibly successful and lots of people wanted the same thing across Wales.
So you've done a huge amount of work on, I guess, making, or I guess bringing Repair Cafe from a very informal organisation, which was that basically you and me and whoever we could drag off the street, to something that has a brand, a website, great social media, and many, many repair cafes. And you're now one of the 3 paid employees of Repair Cafe Wales. So we've gone through. So I don't want to linger too long on what we've done or especially what you've done over the last few years. But in terms of the organisation at this point in time, obviously there's COVID going on, but ignoring COVID, what would you say the strengths and weaknesses of the organisation were?
I think some of the strengths, well, one of the strengths is that nobody else is doing what we're doing in the way that we're doing it, definitely in Wales, but probably in the UK as well. So we seem to have hit a niche whereby we have created a really, really clever way of helping communities open repair cafes. And that really is because we broke all the barriers down to enable communities to do that. So I think that's a big strength of ours. Another big strength, I think, is the people that we've got involved. Not to blow our own trumpets, but we have got really good people on the ground and at board level who are driving the organisation forward, who are all, have lots and lots of different expertise and skills, really good at stakeholder management. And I think the relationships we've built over the last 3 years, because of the people that we are, is a massive strength as well.
Just before you
those are the 2 biggies.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the relationships that you and Phoebe that have built that perhaps small ambitious third sector organisations may not have done, that have been useful to us?
Yeah. So quite often, I don't know whether this is a weakness or not, but we have so many opportunities available to us because what we do taps into so many areas of society. So yes, we repair things, but also we can help with mental health, loneliness, isolation, upskilling people, skills, education. mental health. We touch on so many things. So very often Phoebe and I are working away, see something on the news or in social media, which immediately sparks our interest because we know that because we have, you know, pop-up events in communities across Wales, or because they may be beneficial to our repair cafes. And we have the confidence to be able to literally reach out and contact people and start a relationship that means that, you know, either they or us or both benefit from that relationship. I think probably the biggest one is the relationship that we have with the Welsh Government, which we didn't pursue. And in fact, they reached out to us, having seen what we've done, and we built a relationship from there. And I think quite a lot of people may consider, because we are funded by Welsh Government, may consider their relationships with Welsh Government as being looked over their shoulder, monitoring, reporting, and we just don't have that relationship with them. We have I would call it a partnership approach, where we're all trying to work towards the circular economy. And obviously, because of what we do in the nature of our relationship, you know, we continue to get funding from that organisation. And I think that's probably one of the most important relationships we've got going at the moment.
I think, yeah, so I guess, you know, a lot of people looking at this video will be from, you know, much larger countries than Wales. And I guess one thing that I would emphasise is that Wales is, you know, it's quite a tight-knit country when it comes to sort of governance and, you know, the important people. And so those types of relationships, you know, even with the First Minister that you and Phoebe have developed and fostered, are doable. Whereas, you know, a charity or a third sector organisation of our size in even England is never going to get, you know, any thought space from Boris or the Prime Minister or indeed any of the cabinet. So yeah, and that's not to downplay, you know, what you've achieved, but having that really high level of political understanding. And also, it seems the Welsh Government is aligned with this sort of, you know, more of an environmental bent than many other countries might be.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think one of the things that we did differently that others may not is we went grassroots upwards. So we didn't start with approaching the Welsh Government. We started with helping communities and went from there. And we didn't need to approach the Welsh Government because they could see what we were doing from afar. Hence them approaching us. So it's more about grassroots upwards. I think is a very different approach.
Yeah, cool. And in terms of the weaknesses of the organisation at the moment,
we have a lot of older volunteers. So in some repair cafes, it's great because we have a mix. So, you know, in cities, for example, we may have a mix of, you know, students and retirees. But actually, in quite a lot of our repair cafe communities, quite a lot of our volunteers are of the old generation. So and that's amazing because that's a unique skill set in itself, which they have amazing expertise that they can pass down to people when they're showing them how to fix their things. But, you know, it's for longevity purposes, it's not brilliant. So that is something that we constantly need to work on. We've recently been invited to be part of an intergenerational cross-party working group, which is really helpful because that may continue our efforts of trying to do that. But that is something that we are big time working on. And I think the other thing is we need to get shouting about us a bit more because we're still quite conscious that not everybody, or not even maybe 50% of the Welsh population know who we are and what we do. So for us, I think that's another big issue.
Okay. So if you could look forward sort of 5 or even 10 years, and assume there's no constraints. Now, I want to ask you about sort of your vision for the future. Now, I would take it as given that, you know, we all want as many repair cafes as possible in towns and cities and corners, you know, wherever. Aside from that, What would your ideal Repair Cafe Wales organisation look like?
So we've kind of got two things going on. We've obviously got what you just mentioned, which is let's just get a repair cafe in every city, suburb, every town, every village in Wales. Great. But what that impacts on is a cultural mindset shift towards circular economy thinking. So actually, 10 years down the line, I would like us to have been part of that shift. I would like our communities to be a bit more resilient because they've learned how to fix things themselves. And I appreciate that in 100 years, that may mean that repair cafes don't exist because everybody's so skilled that they, will know how to fix their things, which is fine. So yeah, 10 years down the line, I would like to hope that we have more resilient communities and everybody is way more focused on reuse and repair. And I'd like to think that we have been a big part of that, because there is another, the secondary side to us is that we do have huge amounts of opportunity with so many different types of organisations that we can partner with to make that happen.
And in terms of other things that we could be doing, I realise you said, there's almost limitless possibilities. But if in 5 years' time, you looked back and said, number one, we've opened repair cafes everywhere. What would in terms of projects, what would your number 2, 3, and 4 be, do you think?
I would love to be able to get into schools. I would love education within Wales, a part of that to include repair and reuse and ultimately the circular economy. I would love there to be skill sharing workshops everywhere. If we could impact huge institutions and organisations by helping them, so the NHS, if they're on their knees because they're underfunded, could we help them by going in and making a waiting room fixed? Could we do that? I don't know. I think there's huge amounts of opportunity to not only go out there and fix things within our communities where people are, but that also provides really lovely opportunities for volunteers to get together and make something better in their own community, which they will really care about. So it's really touching on that community resilience. And, it's one of the reasons that our repair cafes work so well is because people genuinely care about their community and who lives in them and so on.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of thinking about these priorities, so there's a whole load of things that you've mentioned that we could do, from training to mental health to schools to the repair cafes themselves to sort of cultural change. You mentioned earlier some type of carbon app, carbon modelling, and I guess you've had a foot in the corporate sector. In the corporate sector, it's quite simple. You say, we want to maximise the amount of money that we make, and we do that by, following a relatively simple strategy of maximising sales and minimising costs. It's a bit more complicated for us, isn't it?
Very, yeah.
In your head, does it rely? So I'm asking because there's a lack of research and writing and thinking about strategy in the third sector. In terms of strategizing, other than that polar light or North Star, not polar light, North Star of having, opening repair cafes, do you see our strategy as something that is just, dependent on funding and opportunities as they come along? Or do you think there should be more sort of structure and planning around it?
I would love more structure and planning, but as you know, we're underfunded and under-resourced. So yeah, if we're blue sky thinking and that we've suddenly got, let's pretend, all the resources and the funding that we need, I would like to put structure and planning around it. But I think what I've learned by being in this sector is that you have to flex and adapt to what you're being faced with. So for example, the circular economy is going bonkers at the moment. Not just in Wales, but globally, but particularly in Wales, because we've got a really proactive circular economy department within Welsh Government, and everybody kind of feels like everybody wants a piece of the circular economy at the moment. So I think that is moving so rapidly and changing so quickly that you just need that ability to be able to flex and adapt. But it's also really useful to have a basis of structure and plans in place. Doesn't mean that you can't change them, but at least you constantly know where you're at.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And the final thing I wanted to ask about is, you've mentioned, we started from the grassroots and we kind of, built this up and up, and we started to get, because of the success, we started to get the attention of senior decision makers in government, both in the UK or Wales and further afield. To what extent, what needs to happen in order for us and similar organisations to have a real impact at the policy level in terms of changing, not just changing the laws, but also changing culture and the way people think?
Yeah, again, obvious one, funding resources so that we can have the best impact that we can. But I also think presence. So there's quite a push at the moment to focus on high streets and the way they look, maybe even think about 20-minute neighbourhoods. And I do think by putting our type of initiatives on high streets, you really maximise that cultural shift in thinking, because people are generally, naturally curious. So if they're walking down the street to get their local paper and pint of milk, and they wander past a library of things or a repair cafe or a remakery, we are just curious individuals, so we will just want to know what that is. So even just by having a presence where there's lots of footfall, I think that would have a massive impact.
It's funny because you mentioned the remakery, you mentioned the Library of Things, and you've obviously got a foot in the Library of Things world, a big foot. There, from my experience, there's a lot of organisations out there, and we probably don't know all of them in Wales. You might, but I certainly don't. But it really struck me that there's dozens of organisations, and sometimes they pop up. Sometimes they last for a couple of years and they disappear, and sometimes they'll be there for a long time, but it'll only be a couple of people, and then sometimes they'll grow like us. But there does seem to be a lack of coordination and communication, because nobody's funded to do that. And I know you've talked previously about having a map of sort of all these type of events that are going on and organisations. What would you like to see in terms of potentially bringing those together?
Yeah, I would like to see some sort of body that oversees anything to do with circular economy, sharing economy, repair, reuse, anything like that in Wales. I think for the layperson who say they just moved to a new area, if they could access a map that has everything that is that, I think that makes a huge difference to people's lives straight away, particularly awareness as well. But it also would reduce duplication of efforts. So quite often I hear about organisations at the top of Wales or the bottom of the Wales or side of Wales, and they seem to be doing pretty much the same thing, and they're being funded either by Welsh Government or other funding bodies, and it seems a bit ridiculous that we are potentially bashing away at things that other people are doing, which is one of the reasons that we share our sort of toolkit for starting repair cafes, because we've done the really hard graft and we know it works. So there's no point other organisations doing the same thing, if we're all trying to get repair, the repair movement as big as possible. So yeah, I would love a body that oversees that and monitors it and has a map and shares information and resources and advice. That'd be great.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for for funders, because if you've got a pot of money that's going to go, you want to see it going to needy children or the environment or whatever. And although that type of cross platform or cross organisation thing is I guess so important for doing good, avoiding duplication, maximising synergies, to use a horrible word, it's not something that's, I guess, fits into an easy pot for funders, is it?
Not an easy one, but I think ultimately it improves people's quality of lives. So it is more long term than quick win. But I do think, you know, across Wales, if somebody can't afford to fix their Hoover because they live in a really deprived area, but they can go onto their mobile phone, see a map, and go, actually, I can get it fixed there for free. Yeah. That is an immediate impact of, you know, just completely improving somebody's quality of life.
Yeah. The other, in fact, I said the final thing. There is one final thing, and I'll stick to this. Is it strikes me that, you know, we're talking about strategy, and we've got the brand, and you've got the website, and there's, you know, there's this aura of permanence about, you know, third sector organisations, because they, you know, they're professional and all, you know, they're looking professional. And we've got the brand, and we've got the people on the board, but at the same time, we're so dependent on funding, and that if the funding dried up, which I don't think it will do, but if it did dry up, then, you know, there would be a shell there. There'd be the process and procedure, there'd be the toolkits, and there'd be the, you know, some repair cafes would, you know, quite easily continue without our input. It is an odd position. It's very different to the private sector, isn't it? Because, you know, if I think about the 5-year plan, we could be, you know, huge, or we could be nothing at all. And that's quite destabilizing, isn't it, in some ways?
Yeah, and actually, I don't think organisations can actually be, it's not sustainable to not be able to plan further than 12 months. It's just not helpful. You know, you've got a 3 to 5 year strategy sat on your shelf. If you can't implement it because you don't have secured funds for more than 12 months or a line of revenue coming in, it's really, really tricky. And it's something that is one of our biggest challenges at the moment, you know, whether that's us bashing away with Welsh Government saying, come on, commit to, you know, 3 to 5 years worth of core funding, or whether we're, you know, sitting at board level thinking, actually, how can we generate income so that we can become self-sustaining? And it's almost like a vicious circle. If we've got money in the bank to be able to pay for somebody to give them the time to think about how to generate income or access funding, that's great. But you need that in the first place. So it's really tricky.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was honestly the last thing. So, Cerys, thank you for your time.
No worries.
And yes, we'll catch up soon.
Okay, thanks.
Right, bye-bye.
Bye.